love to see your
Happy
face.
belated Thanksgiving.
Happy belated turkey time to you as well. Hope it was lovely. Was it
It was
lovely?
so lovely. That's my delight.
Oh, it is? Mine was
Yeah.
going to be a cringe,
Oh,
but
okay. Should I
you
do my
can
delight
delight.
and then you
Yeah,
do your cringe?
yeah, sure.
We got to come home to Maryland and be with my family and my
And that's
friends. It was
beautiful.
so lovely. We even did a Friendsgiving
You
with my
did?
really good friends from our old neighborhood, and everyone came
Oh,
over and we had Friendsgiving on Monday night. And then my whole family, my sister, my brother came up from North Carolina. My nephew came down from New York. My other nephew came up from North Carolina. My other sister came from Vermont. I mean, we're all together.
wow.
It was
Wow.
so awesome. We had such a good time. The kids were in
Who's
heaven. Anyway, it was delightful. I'm trying to just stay in delight mode and not sad mode because
Don't be
I just
sad.
miss home and I miss my peoples and I miss my family and I miss the comfort of just like being around people who get you
I
and just,
know.
you know what I mean? Get you, get you. It reminded me of how isolated you can be all the way across the country in California. But
Bean.
I was
And I'm
supposed to say
coming
a
to
delight.
visit soon. Yeah. And I'm going to
Yes,
come visit soon and we're going to
you better.
hold each other and stare into each other's eyes.
Beautiful. So that was my Thanksgiving. It was delightful. That's our family's big holiday every year. We don't do
That's really
anything the way we
nice.
do Thanksgiving. What about
Oh, I
you?
love
You have a
that.
cringe already?
It was just my cringe was
Oh,
really just going to take us back to Halloween because my Halloween candy is still out and I can't stop eating Tootsie Rolls.
oh,
I
okay.
honestly feel like I'm a gigantic Tootsie Roll.
You should have come
Normally,
dressed as one.
I love Tootsie Rolls, but I don't like go out and buy them in the store. But when they're in the Halloween candy every single year, I can't quit. I cannot quit.
Yeah.
Every time I walk by, I
Tootsie
have to
Rolls?
take it. I don't What do you want from me?
I don't think
I,
that's,
you don't have to
I
be
don't
judgmental. I'm
like
already
it.
upset that I can't stop eating them. I do like them. Have you ever had
Why?
vanilla Tootsie Rolls?
Ew.
Oh no, Bean, vanilla?
Yuck.
Is that because it's white?
Oh, jeez. No, you know what? Okay, the consistency of a Tootsie Roll stresses me out. It just
What?
feels like cavities to me. It gets all sticky and stuck.
Girl, I have watched you eat gummies like it's nobody's business. Do not talk to me about it's
Gummies
sticky
are
and
not
stuck.
gummies
Those
are
are
not the same
cavities.
consistency. I know, but a Tootsie Roll is tougher. It feels like a stale piece of candy.
I know, I like that.
Oh, you like
Truth
the
talk,
staleness.
I like gummy bears only when they're stale.
Ew, bean.
Yeah.
But you
Sorry.
know what you love, and it always reminds me of you? You love
What?
Turkish Delight, which is
Oh, I
very
sure
light and
do.
fluffy and gummy and not
It's
stale,
true. It's
right? Or
true.
do you like
Yeah.
stale Turkish Delight too, probably?
I probably would like stale Turkish delight.
Yeah.
I do love me some
I've sent you
Turkish
all
delight.
kinds of Turkish Delight and halva. I've sent you all kinds of
Yeah.
Middle Eastern treats.
You're my
Um,
Turkish delight.
well, I don't think that's that cringy other than it's Tootsie Rolls. I think if you had said another candy, I would have been
I was
totally
just
cool.
saying that like I have no self-control and I can't walk by it and see it. Like I
Right.
have to take a Tootsie Roll. And I think they're all still left because I believe other people may have a similar sentiment to you about the
Yes,
Tootsie
correct.
Rolls.
Because Tootsie Rolls are gross. It's just accepted facts.
The other fun thing that keeps it fresh is that on Halloween you get all the different shaped and sized Tootsie Rolls. You get that thick duty log one, you get the skinny long one, you get the short minis. So it's like a surprise. I see the wrapper poking out, I grab it. I don't know what it's going to be. It could be anything.
What do you do with the big, thick ones? Don't make the joke. Suck it in. Don't say it, Michael Scott. How do you eat them? I mean, do you eat the whole thing in one sitting? Do you
No,
like
you can't.
stuff it all in your mouth?
Oh,
That
in
looks
one
like that would
sitting?
be horrible.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
one sitting, but like
You like
can't
bite it
put the
off?
yeah, you can't do the whole thing. That would like straight rip your teeth out. You'd be
But doesn't
gummies.
biting a Tootsie Roll off also hurt your teeth? Okay, we're getting
No,
too
it's
in
sort
the
of
weeds.
perforated. It's sort of perforated.
Oh, it is?
Anyway, if anybody out there likes Tootsie Rolls, I would like you to join my Tootsie Roll cult, which leads me into today's topic, which is
Oh, good
cults.
one.
I'm happen to be, I will say, I don't remember who, I think it might have been you or our producer, has been discussing doing cults for like, I don't know,
Ever.
5 months now. Like the concept of cults has really gotten us excited multiple times. Right?
I am really excited to talk about it. I'm a little scared. It came up
Why?
because one of our sound editor, who was on
Yeah.
the podcast, Anushri, has repeatedly asked me how what I do is different from cult leadership. If
No
we're being
filter
honest.
industry. No, also
So that's how it started.
I think it's fascinating to see how easily people, well, not easily, but it's definitely an interesting manipulation, but how people are capable of being fully brainwashed and believing in some group think that is crazily unhealthy for them and those around them. But it happens. I mean, a lot of people are susceptible more so than you would think, which is why I think it's fascinating.
Agree. I think that looking into this episode, the thing
Yeah.
that blew me away is how easily we can judge people who join
Right.
cults and how
Right.
easy it is to join one.
Right, right. And without even
Yeah,
like totally noticing what's going on. It's like a very smooth process because these cult leaders are something else. You know what I mean?
there's something. All right, well, let's get into it. I thought maybe I could
Yeah.
start us off by defining what the hell is a cult and then telling you why people join them. What
I
do you
would
think?
I think that would be great. Thanks.
And then I think you have a good story for us of a cult.
I'm gonna talk
Yes?
about a cult. I would like everyone to
Okay.
take a guess about what cult I'll be talking about. There's so many good ones.
Oh, yeah,
There's
there's a lot
political
of.
ones, there's some good sex ones, some real hot sex
Oh,
cults. Yeah.
I don't think
Not
that
to make
they're
light of sex
hot
cults.
sex
Yeah.
cults.
I
Nope.
know. It's just me talking. In
Rewind.
fact, yeah. In
That's
fact,
another Michael Scott moment.
it's quite terrible what happens.
Yeah.
Anyway, why don't you just lead us out of the gate with telling us what a cult is, please?
Okay, I actually for this week looked up the dictionary definition so we could just ground
Webster's
ourselves. Yes.
dictionary
So,
says,
according to the dictionary, a cult is a system of religious veneration and devotion directed toward a particular figure or object. One, a relatively small group of people having religious beliefs or practices regarded by others as strange or sinister.
see,
Dun,
that's
dun,
not fair, right?
dun. A misplaced or excessive admiration for a particular person or thing.
I'm in your cult.
Misplaced.
It's not
Cult
misplaced,
of
though.
being.
It's properly
Um,
placed.
all right, so that's the definition of cults. And like you said, there are so many of them in history that have sadly ended
Yeah.
in crazy tragedy.
Yeah,
I think the one that comes up a lot in people's minds, or at least for me, is Jonestown.
totally.
And Reverend Jim Jones, this is in the 70s. He developed the People's Temple, and he was preaching things that people were really attracted to, which we'll talk about in a minute, because there's actually 3 or 4 main things that attract people to cults that are the same across most cults
really?
that I want to get into. Yeah. And in 1977, all these abuse allegations started happening here in the U.S., where he had the People's Temple. So he moved to Guyana to build Jonestown as a utopian paradise. It instead basically turned into a prison where people were working and being treated terribly. A congressional delegation came out to Jonestown to investigate, and that then caused Jim Jones to force the entire residents of Jonestown to drink a poisoned juice, which, by the way, did you know that that's where drinking the Kool-Aid came from?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't.
I did. When you were saying it, I was going to say Kool-Aid, but yeah.
Yeah.
I can't.
So they all
Even
drank
you
this
saying
juice,
that, yeah.
where
Even
909 people, including children, died.
it's like so hard to fathom. Somebody
It's
saying, "Drink this." I know, and like
you
my
do it.
kids, I know,
And you
but
do
it
it.
happens, right?
Yeah, according to a lot of different articles, there's thousands of cults around the world, and there
Thousands.
are thousands, and there are various forms of cult. There's religious,
Mm-hmm.
there's political, and
Mm-hmm.
there's self-improvement,
Oh,
which is why I think we
a
keep
nursery.
getting the question from a nursery about whether I am trying to start a cult, which I am not. But really, it's, another definition I saw that was less dictionary-y, but felt really practical, was a group or movement with a shared commitment to a non-typical ideology led by a charismatic leader.
Uh-oh, you are charismatic.
We might end this
You do
episode
have
with
the
the
riz.
takeaway that I'm trying to start a cult.
And in that regard, it's not so negative. Like being, following something with a charismatic leader, it even leads to, there's the cult following for movies and stuff when there's like one special movie. So I feel like cult gets a bad rep, but sometimes it can be a lovely thing. Like in
Well,
that
like Swifties, people
instance.
are always like Swifties
Right.
are part of a cult. Right.
Totally. They are.
But I think that we are really judgmental about people who join cults. And so I got really curious about what is it that makes people want to join
Yeah.
cults? What is the
Yeah. I'm
psychology behind
sad for
it?
them. Yeah.
And I actually think they're very common needs. But before I tell you what I found, the other thing that I think is important is to just define what the characteristics of being in a cult are, so that we
Okay.
are talking about, because again, we just went there, right? Like you could define anything as a cult. So let's just
Totally.
get really narrow in what we mean when we're talking cult right now.
You were
So
like, so that
one,
we can all understand that I am not
it's
running
not
a cult.
it's not me. Okay, so basic characteristics. One, a high level of commitment is demanded of the followers.
Mhm.
Two, there's a strict hierarchy. There's a major separation between unsuspecting members and
Right.
the leadership.
Right.
Three, it provides answers to life's biggest questions.
Oh.
Four, it then gives you a recipe to change those things for the better for you. Stop looking at me like that. And then lastly, there are formal and informal systems of control to keep members obedient.
That's where you're not a cult.
Thank God. The other characteristic that wasn't commonly mentioned, but is definitely part of cults in modern society, is that they kind of run like an MLM or a pyramid scheme, where older members, or members who have not older members who have been there longer, are also tasked with recruiting newer members, and that continues to branch out and out and out.
You saw that even with the most recent, the Nixivism.
Yeah, how do you say that?
Nexium?
I'm
not sure. Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it works like a pyramid scheme.
Yeah.
And actually, the members that go out and recruit have talked to reporters and said that they're really encouraged to go out and focus on people who are either new to an area or have undergone some kind of loss. So you're looking for vulnerable
like
people
praying.
who feel lonely and not attached to anything. The other thing I thought was fascinating is that more than 2/3 of cult members are recruited by a friend, a family member, or a coworker.
Oh, so someone you trust.
Exactly. So it's not like you're just like magnetized to something. Bean's making a face because all of the things in her mind are pointing to her best friend being a cult leader. No, but the people that it's not, we look at it like, whoa, how were you just like attracted to this crazy cult leader?
Right.
But no, it's a friend that's telling you, no, I have an answer to your loneliness. I have an answer to what's making you feel so disassociated. And then there's a promise of reward or a change in life. So
I will,
go.
I saw, I did read something that also a lot of these people who do join cults, have always kind of felt isolated and like they don't fit in with mainstream society. And then they find what they feel is more like-minded people to them, like more of these sort of, I don't want to call them outsiders, but people who never were like who never fit in. And they find all these other people, misfits sort of, just like themselves. And they're like, oh, wow, a community.
Yeah. But I think that when you look at the psychology of joining cults, it's beyond just being a misfit. I actually think you're going to relate to a lot of these. So the first one is desiring a greater sense of community.
Yeah,
so
I can.
People who long for human connection, who feel like, and this is why they say new to an area. I mean, I can relate, just having relocated to California a year and a half ago, this sense of like, whoa, I'm not as deeply connected to a community as I have been in the past. And that does feel isolating.
Sure.
And actually in that Nexum documentary, this woman named Jane talks about a lot how she was drawn to Nexum because of the sense of community. She said she struggled with forming deep relationships with other women in her life. And if you remember, that cult was all about women recruiting other women. Yeah. And she heard what a close-knit community the Nexum members were, and it was a women's group. And that's why she became interested. So, people talk a lot about how a hallmark of any cult is because the cult leader creates a pack mentality. And that pack mentality is like, come join us. It's that peer pressure of it's way better over here. It's cooler over here. And if you're just wanting to connect with people that you have something in common with, that pack mentality can be a draw. So you're not necessarily drawn to the leader, you're drawn to the community.
Now that you're saying it, I'm like, should I join a cult? That sounds kind of nice,
I told you.
right?
Yeah. So the second psychological reason is that they're in a state of extreme vulnerability.
Mm,
An individual person's life goals aren't happening the way they want. Things have happened that have been disappointing or tragic in their lives. And, people say that, these reporters that have written about this say former cult members say that they wouldn't have joined this cult if they weren't going through a difficult life event when they were approached to join.
interesting.
So there is absolutely this fragility, the trauma, the grief, the loneliness that attracts people to it.
And these leaders are like preying on them too.
Right, exactly. The third psychological draw is the us versus them mentality that's created in cults. So cults really focus on how systems are broken and how they have the answer to solving these systems. So Jonestown that I mentioned, when they moved out of the US to start this utopian society, it was about sharing. It was about everyone having access to resources. It was about fighting against all of the repression and oppression that happens in a capitalistic system or in a political system. See, you're getting recruited and I'm not even trying.
Yeah.
But they promise this solution and they give an us versus them, which then makes this pack mentality grow even deeper. And what they say is that this happens through a lot of mind control and brainwashing, where members are recruited and brought in, and then they're joining meetings and talks where the similar messages are being told over and over again, and you begin to become brainwashed. This was really interesting. They did a survey in 1980, and 54% of high school students in the San Francisco Bay Area reported at least one recruiting attempt by a cult member.
Wait, when?
1980.
Oh, wow.
But
interesting. It's a hot time for the cults.
Yeah, 54%.
It's a lot.
40% reported 3 to 5 contacts of trying to be recruited into a cult in the 80s.
Oh,
and one of the articles I read says that cults basically exist at every layer of society, and they exist within every country that they've looked into. And there are cults that just begin from a sense of wanting to come together around a major issue. So QAnon is talked about a lot as having very similar psychological tendencies to a cult, which is to try to change a system, and then a lot of brainwashing that can occur because people are just so at their wits' end and exhausted with the system that they live in and feel so unseen and unrepresented in that system.
And there's a high level of paranoia, which feeds into that us versus them mentality.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know, when you hear those psychological tendencies, don't they feel really relatable?
They do. And even with the being it spread among all different groups of people, it's because that desire to belong and find a community has nothing to do with where you live, how much money you make, who you are, what color your skin is. Everybody wants to belong to something.
Belong. Exactly.
It's like a core need. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. And I also think the reason I wanted to just start there is because we can have such hubris when we look at people who join cults and be like, oh, not
silly
me.
juice.
How ridiculous. Right. How could you? And, these are really smart people who will have come out of the system and be like, yeah, I mean, it was pretty easy for me to trust the person who is my friend or my family member or my coworker, to feel like there's an answer to my isolation or my frustration about the system I work in. And this was a solution. And it's a baby step sliding scale.
Yeah.
Just do this. Okay, now just do this. Now if you come to our meeting, well, actually, why don't you move in here and bring your family? All right, well, now why don't you, go out there and try to find new members? It just happens so organically that I think it would be pretty easy to find yourself in that slope if you're feeling particularly vulnerable in your life, which we all have phases.
Have you ever watched those documentaries on cults? They all say the same thing. Like, I get it. It sounds crazy that I was able to fall into it, but it just happened.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why people join. You were going to tell me what cult leaders have in common. What are the traits of a cult leader?
I mean, I think we just kind of addressed some of it. One of the biggest things is the the charisma. They're always like
Why did I ever teach you that word?
I don't know. Nobody uses it. I've never really even
Nobody
heard it over
uses it.
here, but I
Oh,
like it. It's a
okay.
cute way of saying
It's
charisma.
cute. It's cute.
Thanks.
Yep.
Um, anyway, so they're usually like super dynamic also. In good ways and in bad ways. Like they can have like unpredictable natures, which plays into their dynamicism. What dynamic?
Oh, don't make me try to say a word again.
It plays into their dynamic natures.
There we
Okay.
go. Yeah.
They demand loyalty, so there's not a lot of room for criticism. That's one of the big things, is that they can't appear to anybody as though they don't know what they're talking about or that they're
Right.
doing anything wrong. So you cannot really ever speak up against them, and they also want you to believe that they're all knowing. And that's basically it. That they have this dynamic personality, super charismatic. They don't allow anyone to negatively speak about them or about what they're doing, and they just slowly become these like idols to people.
And isn't narcissism a very important trait?
Yes. Yes. I'm just going to say yes. I mean, I think there's also extreme mental illness, but extreme intelligence and mental illness combined.
Right. Right. But I brought up narcissism because I think that when you look at these cult leaders, the thing they have in common is also that everything is designed
Around them.
to benefit self.
Right.
And so empathy is absolutely missing, although they can have the charisma that communicates empathy,
Right.
that, everything they're constructing is about solving some deep wound within. And whether that is, I need a bunch of women fawning over me, or I, want to feel like I have control over this group of people and they'll do what I say, or I'm going to be the one to suck it to the system because it let me down somehow. It's all about them.
I wonder if they go into these endeavors with that mentality of like, I'm going to get a bunch of people to follow me, or if they like, it just kind of happens with their personality. They get a few and then they're like, oh, this feels good. And they keep going. I'm curious.
There has to be some desire to
control,
not just control, but like for their ego to feel like they are so powerful that they can get people to follow what they ask them to do. Like there has to be some desire to get that egoic need met of getting people to follow them.
They were like, I'll be either a politician or a cult leader.
Exactly. 100%. Or a celebrity.
Anyway, when you think of cult leaders, come on, give me another one other than Jonestown.
Okay,
give me a good
Jonestown, one. David Koresh.
Oh, David Koresh. Love that. Yeah. No.
Right? Nexum.
Yeah, but I forget what the leader of that one was.
Rainier. Keith Rainier.
Yes. Oh, and he would tattoo his initials onto them in like a symbol. Did you watch that documentary?
Yes, in very private places.
Oh, very private places.
Very upsetting.
Right, come on, give me the most
I'm missing
famous.
a big one.
You are. Do you want me to
Wait,
give it
what's
to
a
you?
hint? Wait, give me a hint.
I'll give you a hint. Sharon Tate is my hint.
Oh, Manson.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would you like me to talk to you about Manson?
That's what you're going to tell us about?
Oh yeah, because would you like to hear my connection? Warning. Trigger warning. Would you like to hear my
connection to Charles Manson?
I mean, like not really, but sort of. One of his main
Here we go again. Her uncle's girlfriend's cousin.
No,
here we go.
Good.
Okay,
this is even better. I like to pick people that I have some sort of something with, because then it makes it even more fascinating for me while I'm researching.
Of course.
I don't know if people know of her as well, but she was one of the big Manson girls. Her name was Squeaky Fromm. She tried to assassinate Gerald Ford.
Oh my God.
Anyway, she was in prison in West Virginia for a long time, and my mom was her doctor in prison.
What? Shut up.
She liked my mom, of course. Everyone likes my mom.
Who doesn't like your mom? But wait a minute.
Including
what
Squeaky
does your
Fromm.
mom say about her?
She said she was quiet. She didn't speak a lot. She was in like one of the facilities that house people outside of the general population. I don't think she could be among the general population. She actually was telling me today, I talked to her about it this morning, that I guess it must have been in the late 70s, early 80s. Yeah. she was in this special facility and they had like a den, kind of sounded nice. And they were getting a microwave because microwaves just came out. And
Okay.
Squeaky was not interested in the microwaves. She was like really freaked out about it and kind of annoyed that they were putting a microwave in because of all the
Wow.
waves. And anyway,
Right.
that's my Manson.
Wow.
That's my
That
Manson
is a
connection.
real ass
Connection.
connection. I'm
I
sorry I made
know.
fun of you. That was a good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. My mom was Squeaky From's doctor.
All right. Well, how did Charles Manson get people to do the things that they
Okay.
did?
So I'm just going to give you a quick little. It was also called the Manson family, which is super
Yeah.
creepy. Anyway, he was a career criminal. He was an aspiring musician. He was like in and out of prison a bunch in the 60s. And then he was after his release from one of his prison stints, he began attracting mostly young women, surprise, surprise, in California because he was super charismatic and he was
Mm-hmm.
smart and he had all of these like teachings and they were really intrigued. One of his big things was he had like this big doomsday philosophy that actually had some elements of Scientology and some fringe hippie
Mm-hmm.
shit, which I probably would end up getting behind. He did claim one of his big claims, which we do know, was there was an impending race war coming, which he referred to as Helter Skelter after the Beatles song, which, sidebar, who knew Manson had like an obsession with the Beatles? Did you know that?
No. The Beatles
Me
are all about
either.
peace and love.
I know. So he had this obsession with the Beatles and he became obsessed with their White Album. And then he started interpreting their music as like predictions of this apocalyptic race war
Oh,
that was
wow.
coming. And it really like influenced his insanely deranged mentality.
Well,
Um,
probably
yeah.
also under the influence of some psychedelics.
Totally. So he really liked Helter Skelter and the song Piggies, and he thought that they were representative of what was to come. Anyway,
Wow.
yeah, they lived on
Okay.
these communal ranch outside of Los Angeles, which I didn't know was actually a deteriorating Western movie set.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
called, oh, you knew that?
You know how I knew that? There's a movie with Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
It's called Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's directed by Quentin Tarantino, so it's super gory and graphic.
Oh, I
And it's
think I've seen it.
basically reimagining what could have happened if the Manson family had been stopped. That's all I'll say.
Oh, okay.
It's really good. But anyway, I knew that because in the movie, they're in this old
Ranch.
ranch. Yeah.
So they live in Spahn Ranch and they're living rent free. They just have to like do it in exchange for labor, whatever. And he made it seem like it was this frontier lifestyle. So he made it seem like it was appealing and not some like dilapidated, rundown movie set.
Wow.
Um, yeah. So
Wait, can I just
yeah,
say something?
yeah, of course.
We were talking about what would attract people to this. Like now that we're thinking about the psychology of people who would have said
Right.
yes, think about young women who have come to
Totally.
Hollywood to try to make
Totally.
it. And think about how crushing that can be to their soul
Totally.
and to their dreams. And so
And
then the
self-esteem.
promises, if you're charismatic, that you can make to a young woman about how either you'll help her get there or,
Totally.
you know what I mean? Like it totally makes sense now why it was easy for him to recruit people.
Totally.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry.
And
Back
no,
to you.
I think that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Anyway, so his manipulation, which they obviously all cult leaders do, he practiced a lot of things to keep these women in line, essentially, and to buy into his totally asinine philosophies. He practiced some isolation, so he would move people from like from wherever they were and make them completely dependent on this community where they were living. Like
Right.
they needed him and the group for everything they needed to do.
Right.
LSD, which you mentioned, he used a lot of LSD trips and drug use to break down people's resistance and make them more open to his suggestions and theories.
Mm-hmm.
And then also doing the drugs together sort of bonded them. They had this like experience of being super high together.
Yep.
Lack of sleep, sleep deprivation, which can mess any rational thinking human being up. I think we've all
Yep.
been there. If you don't sleep enough, you can go insane, and it
Yep.
weakens their wills, and their walls come down more easily.
Yep.
He created a lot of fear among the group, discussing this impending race war that he was obsessed with, and he created that us versus them mentality that made them want to cling together even more. He used flattery, like a lot of really great cult leaders do. He would tell these people that they were actually the chosen ones and they're the ones who would survive
Mm-hmm.
after this helter-skelter race war happened. They were like, oh, well, we got to stay here then.
Yep.
Sexual control, which God knows it's always involved with these cults. He also, that's a very easy way for him to exert control. Violence, he would have these random outbursts of violence. So it made people really fearful of him and
Mm-hmm.
scared to disobey him. They would see what happened to people who disobeyed, and he could get really violent. And this whole helter skelter thing was like a mission statement for him, and it made them feel like they belonged to something more than just themselves. It was like a purpose almost. Like, we're
Yeah.
going to survive this race war together. We're going to come out enlightened and better. And anyway, he stripped all these people of their identities by doing all of these things. And then they just fell complete victim to his manipulation. At its peak, they had 100 members. I always thought it was like 20.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
me too.
Yeah. I don't know if this is common knowledge. He convinced his followers that he was a reincarnation. Shout out to our last reincarnation episode of Jesus Christ. And the fifth angel prophesied in the book of Revelation. So they were like,
Really?
oh, you're
I didn't know
Jesus.
that
We're going to
either.
follow out. Yeah, me either. Okay.
Interesting.
So the biggest thing we know, the biggest story we know is in 1969, he ordered 4 of his most loyal followers to murder people at the home of Roman Polanski. The saddest part was Roman Polanski's wife was Sharon Tate, and she was 8.5 months pregnant. And Manson encouraged them to do it as gruesome as possible. So they did terribly. Anyway, so they brutally murdered her, poor girl, and they wrote "pig" in blood on the walls, which again is a reference back to that Piggy song from the Beatles.
Oh, yeah.
And then the following day, I'm not sure why, but they killed these 2 grocery store owners. I don't know how that was even related. But the murders were intended to incite helter-skelter by framing the Black Panthers.
Oh,
but
right.
eventually they were all arrested and convicted for the murders. So he didn't actually do any of the murdering, but he was convicted for organizing all of this. And he was sentenced to life in prison, and he died in 2017.
Wow. I did look it up. My question, why was he obsessed with Roman Polanski? And it says here that he was actually obsessed with the home that Polanski lived in. Manson wanted to be a rock star, and he ordered the murders of Tate and 4 others because the previous owner of the house, Terry Melcher, was a music producer who had refused to make a record with Manson.
Oh, that is super creepy. I thought it had something to do with like rejecting Hollywood standards and rejecting, popularity and what's trendy.
But this is what I mean about narcissism. Like, that is 100% about, obviously, his needs,
his own revenge,
and then convincing people. Yeah. Wow.
Great.
Yeah, that is really lived in the imaginations of so many people, the Charles Manson family, and what he convinced them to do. And obviously how racist he was and dangerous he was to inciting the race wars.
Right. The more we're talking about it, though, and were we talking, I don't know if we were saying it on air or off air, were we talking about how cults and organized religion have some similarities? Was that on air?
We talked about it, not on air. We talked about it when we were talking about this episode. Yeah. I think that comes up a lot. I think people question that a lot.
That's what I wanted to know. What do you think the actual difference is? Because obviously they're not the exact same, but there is some overlap there.
Well, let's go back to the list of characteristics of a cult. I think the list is similar to highly organized religions.
Right. Agreed.
Demanding a high level of commitment, a hierarchy between the members and the, ones that are guiding or leading.
Right.
Providing an answer to life's biggest questions, recipe for change of the suffering that's caused. So I think that there's a lot of overlap in how cults get formed. And actually, when I looked into this, I found out that the word cult comes from the word cultus.
Yeah, Latin.
And it describes people who cultivated the worship of gods.
Yes.
It came to mean an excessive devotion, but cult actually comes from a religious word, and many religions began as cults. Many of our current religions
Right.
began as cults and then integrated into modern society. And I think that when any organization, any system is asking you not to use your own mind and intuitive wisdom and
Right.
follow what they're saying instead, it is dangerously close to overlapping a cult. So I think that the difference between a religion is that a religion's about guidance and guidelines, and cults are about control. But I
Correct.
think that the more controlling any system becomes, and the more it tries to tear you away from your own sense of truth, your
Right.
own sense of what you know deep in that reservoir of wisdom,
Right.
the more it's about controlling you and the more it becomes about cults.
So how do you pull back? Like how do you pull back and focus back on your intuitive wisdom if you're
Yeah.
kind of being subjected to what have you, religion, cults, whatever?
Yeah, maybe that's why I'm so fascinated with cults and religion as someone who teaches people how to reconnect to their intuition,
Right.
because I really believe that we have been totally trained to be susceptible to things like cults because we've been trained not to trust ourselves. We've been
Right.
trained that other people have the answers and that we don't.
Right.
And that training happens to us in our education systems. It
Hmm.
happened, we're told the answers in a book, not in some creative method of going out there and experiencing life and searching. We're taught that in our political systems, where we're looking to people to solve these problems who often lie to us and guide us in a direction that's terrible. We're seeing that happen
And not
right
for our
now.
benefit, right?
Yeah.
Even though they claim.
Yeah. We're guided that way by the media that
Yeah.
tells us that they know better, how to look better, how to be better, how to be more valuable. And we're guided that way by religion that tells us there's good and evil. And if we make the wrong choices, we're going to fall in the wrong category and be unredeemable. And the answer to all of that for someone like me is that you actually are tapped in to a deep resource of wisdom from within. And that being caused to forget that is what detaches you from the ability to use that and from your connection to this higher self, this higher frequency that's aligned
Right.
to truth and wisdom, is that indoctrination. And so I think cults are an output. They are a branch off of that same tree of don't trust self, trust these other people. They've got the answers. And my entire life's work is about being like, fuck no, you have the answers. The answers
That's
are
why you're
within you.
not a cult leader,
That's why
Bean.
I'm not a cult. And in
That's
fact, I
the
say to
takeaway.
people, my purpose in life is that you don't need me anymore.
Right.
That's what good looks like to me. But I do think that self-help, modern day self-help, does sometimes edge very closely to
I
cult
could see that.
mentality around things like, believing that celery juice is the answer and that
Right.
is the answer alone, and therefore you abandon all of these other things, for example.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
So there is a lot of conversation right now about how self-help does really get dangerously close to this
I
idea
can.
around cult
Yeah.
mentality. But again, if you are following a self-help guru or a personal growth podcast like Signal, and you're not being
Subscribe.
encouraged, subscribe, like, follow.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
if you're not being encouraged to check in with yourself around the things
Right.
you hear, in fact, I think that's why I was so excited to have you join me in making a podcast, because what I
Right.
didn't want is for
Yeah.
me to be sitting here spouting all the things that
Right.
I know to be true around your intuitive wisdom and how to be happy and healthy and successful without being checked by someone else who's like, wait a minute, I don't agree with you. That disagreement right there is so healthy. It's such a
Right.
good reminder to keep checking in with yourself. And I think that's the voice that Melissa brings to this podcast for me is,
Bean.
hey, wait a minute, that didn't sit right with me. I want to ask more questions about it. That's what it's about. It's about following that voice within and letting that voice lead you to your own truth instead of accepting someone else's truth as the truth.
I love that. And I love that clarity now. Now I know for a fact this is not a cult. I'm kidding.
Thank
You know I
God.
love your
That's
work
what
and I
we
think it's
achieved.
amazing. And I don't think you're anything like Manson. Mory does not equal Manson, guys. That's my
Hallelujah.
takeaway.
Well, I don't think there's a better takeaway than that. I will say that we, a lot of what I brought to the conversation comes from a New Yorker article from 2021, What Makes a Cult a Cult? And we'll link that in the show notes if you want to read more about that. But you guys, as always, thank you for listening. And if you are enjoying this show, the best way to support us right now is to leave us a review and also to share this podcast with your friends and ask them to give us a listen and do the same. So thank you in advance for doing that.
But
Bean?
not like in a cult-like way. Don't tell your friends to come in a cult. Just like in a fun way so they can listen to themselves and understand themselves better.
Yeah, totally casually go recruit your friends.
I'm breezy. Yeah. Okay.
Love you, Bean.
Love you. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.